Hello, welcome to the January 24th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we will go ahead and make sure we'll get started. All right. So I'm hearing audio come through. So let's take so we're going to start our live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply ask your question in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could indicate which level of Cubase that you're using, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, 10, 10.5, 11, 12, and which operating system. That information is often helpful. So we should have after the live stream, several hours after, I'll have to rewatch the live stream and I'll type up all of the questions with timestamps so that people could navigate quickly to particular topics of interest. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been asked in previous live streams, I think we're over 24,000 questions in under 3 years. You could go to you could go to the website cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been incredibly nice in creating that website. One thing, if you don't get an immediate response to your question, realize that I may be at times 30 to 40 minutes behind. I will try my best throughout the live stream to catch up to the live questions, but if you don't see an immediate response, if we could refrain or not repeat the same question over and over. If you don't get an immediate response, we'll try to catch up, and that will just kind of slow down the whole process. That would be appreciated. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just simply do this out of the kindness of their hearts to make it a better community. And also, another wonderful resource of information Jazz Dude does a lot of work with is the Cubase Nation Discord. And there you could find lots and lots of incredibly relevant information for Steinberg users. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I serve as basically as a product specialist for Steinberg products, and we're the United States distributor. And I'm the host. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, or even if you're watching it on a replay, just tell us where you're from in the comments. It's always fascinating. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so we see question. Hello, Greg. The setup button in question is the setup button in a controller section and functions inside the MIDI editor is hidden, not existing. How can I fix it? So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's open up a MIDI editor. So let's just see if we, so it could be that we have the control lanes kind of hidden here. So if you don't see the control lanes, like for seeing MIDI controllers or velocity, try just clicking directly here on the controller lane setup, and let me see if that's maybe in if so if we come over here, so if you don't see that active here, this little icon where you could switch between different controller lanes, that so if we just say, okay, I want to see only velocity, you could also go to the setup window directly here and say, okay, I want to see or hide controller lane. So again, it's this little window right here, and then you could choose to show the controller lanes directly there. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. So I have a question from Jack C. I noticed the undo history doesn't work as expected. I removed the inserts accidentally and couldn't undo them to bring them back. Are the developers working on improving the undo history? Thanks. So it's already implemented for that. So realize that there's an edit history and a mix console history that are different. So if I wanted to come over here, let's say I cut this event, I move it over here, I erase this one, I duplicate this, I take this one and flip it, that when we go to our edit history, that this will only be for edits. So when we come over here and we go to our edit history, we can see all of my different edits. Now that's not going to take into account mix console action. So let's say if we go to our mix console and I have this particular track selected, I adjust the EQ, I come over here. So the edit history is control or command plus the letter Z, and command and control plus the letter Z plus shift for undo redo. So let's say now I'm in my mix console history. I adjust my insert. I take that insert away. I want to add another insert. Let's add a second insert here on this particular. So within and I adjust my volume, my fade. So when we come over here, if we're in the lower zone mixer, we could just now hit Alt or Option plus the letter Z. So if I just wanted to come here now, or you could just click directly here, and now every change that you do, it's a separate independent undo history. So we could do that. And if you're in the large mix console view, so let's say we come over here. Let's see if I get my, oh, sorry, my keyboard on my wrong. We'd actually see our undo history directly here. So now we can just say, okay, we go right back, and I screwed up and, removed the insert. So if we look at my insert here, I could just see a separate, unique undo history for the mix console. So try Alt or Option plus the letter Z, and then you could undo accidentally removing the insert, or accidentally undo, removing a fader that was maybe moved on accident. All right. So we have a question from Ron. Hi, Greg. Wondering if you could fill us in on if Steinberg had anything to say on the local undo and a key editor issue. You mentioned it to them. Thank you again. So yeah, I brought it up in I brought it up in some of the testing forums, and I was going to have a meeting with one of the Cubase managers, but he wasn't able to make it last week. But our meeting was kind of rescheduled for this Friday, so I'll make sure to mention it to him when I speak to him on the meeting. So, but no real updates. All right, so we have a question. Do these streams primarily focus on teaching how to use Cubase? So a lot of people learn how to use Cubase with the streams, but primarily our focus is any question that you have, we try to answer. So if you don't understand a particular feature or you want to accomplish something, we'll try to show you workflow and show you how to use your Cubase better. And often in learning how to use your Cubase better, you learn how to use Cubase. So I think a lot of people that are seasoned users will learn little handy tips and tricks throughout the live stream as well. All right, so we have a question. For the future, I'm considering getting an MSP or MSP5 or MSP7, but they're class AB. They heat so much, or they are safe to use for a long time. Yeah, so they're obviously used in millions of studios worldwide. So I don't think you're going to have a problem with heating. With the heat, I think maybe class A, you might run into more of kind of an issue with that. So you're not going to really have like heating issues with the particular MSP7s. All right. All right, so we see from Filter Freak, hi Greg, is it possible to rename the labels on the MIDI remote editor, as some of them don't show what you're assigning, like the control room listen shows up on a label VST. So, one of the things that you can do if it's not labeled per se, so let's say if we go to our MIDI remote, always, if you just wanted to even just kind of click here and just open up. So let's say if, I just opened up the particular, excuse me one second. So I just opened up the particular, I selected the controller, and then whatever function that you want from a particular controller, you could just, hit that particular function, and you could see the label here just in the naming, in the mapping assistant. So even if it doesn't, I don't know a way to physically change the name there, but if you wanted to use it as a quick reference, just open the mapping assistant, and then whatever label or whatever device that you actually touch will just show you that particular function, very easily. So I just hit this button, it does this. I hit this button, it does that. So you could see the labels just by opening the mapping assistant, and you could open it even when you don't have the MIDI remote open, just by clicking here and then just hitting the button. And then you could see like a very accurate description, but I don't know a way of kind of custom creating the names for the labels as well. Great. All right, so we have a question from Nicholas Carlson. Hi, Greg. I wonder if it's possible to tune down the whole project one semitone. So if I play E minor, it doesn't say E flat minor. If I use audio chords to MIDI and vary audio, etc. Thanks. So what you could do for playback, so let's say if we have a particular project here, and if, let's say, as we're playing this, just check my connections here real quick. So if we wanted to physically transpose, so as it plays, like if I wanted to take like my guitars and drums on this particular track, we could just come right over here and transpose. So that would transpose the audio. Now, if you wanted to, if you had something, like chord tracks, so let's say if I'm here and I add a chord track, we'll just come and we'll add our chord track. And if we wanted to transpose the chord track, so let's say if I just had different chords in, so let's say, okay, I'm in E major, or E minor was the example here. So all right, so let's say we have our chords kind of laid out for us, and if we just wanted to come directly here, we could just choose to change the root key. So where we are, let's say we're in like the key of E minor. So if I just wanted to transpose, we go to the root key here and say, okay, let's go to D sharp, and then that would automatically transpose. And if you wanted to carry over into so that will, and this transpose will do it in real time. If you needed to see it in the transposed key within the very audio, you would probably want to come over here and just do, select the event and go to audio menu to processes, and come here to pitch shift, and then you could choose just to, so let's say, okay, I just want to transpose it down, one semitone. So at this point, we could just say, okay, we're going to just transpose down one semitone, and then that way, when you double click, the audio would automatically show up for the key in Very Audio. If you needed to see an actual E flat represented as opposed to an E, you could just do a hardware, or I'm sorry, an offline process to do the particular transposition, and then that would show up in the correct key. So. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Benny from Sweden. All right. All right, we have Mark Winslow checking in from Hawaii. All right. And we see Jan from Cubase Index. We have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Jason Sykes, who's watching from a hotel in Edinburgh, Scotland. Thanks for joining us. Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. My chat field just jumped. All right. All right, and we have Antoine von Kampen checking in from Netherlands. Thanks for joining us. All right. So you just see a question. What do I do if I want a piano controlled by a chord track to become its own MIDI track, Cubase 12? So let's say if we had, we just switch projects and you want to turn it into MIDI, all you would have to do is, let's say I have a Rhodes part here, and let's say with a chord track. Okay, so we have our chords here. If you wanted to take these and populate like on a particular track, is just drag the chord track to the track, and then it's going to just create all the chords for us. So we could just double click, and then we could have those actual notes in as MIDI data. So all you have to do is, once you have the chord track populated, just drag it down. I think you could also maybe go to project, to chord track, and say chords to MIDI on the selected track, and you could do it like that. So let me know if that's what you want to do. All right, so we see from Patrick, you'd sent a picture. Can you show us how to select notes? So I think in this scenario, and I was just trying to recreate it. Let's see, and it was kind of a scenario with like maybe a scale. So let me just come here and recreate the picture that Patrick had sent. So he had kind of a repeating, kind of a maybe like a scale pattern, and he wanted to select like 2 notes on every other measure. So let me just add this in. So I'll just do, okay, let's do 16th notes. Okay, so I'll just, okay, so now what we want to do is to, so I think that we may have to use a macro, so to do this. So I'm going to start with the notes selected here. And then what I want to do is to select, let's say, the notes that are F and G, or we'll say G and A, but every other measure. So I'm going to select the first event with a range. So let's build a macro, and I'm going to build a MIDI logical editor preset first. So we'll come over here, and I'll say we want to select we'll say type is equal to note. The position is going to be inside cycle. And we're going to move the cycle as part of the macro. And let's say in this case, we want it to be G3 and A3. So, and we'll say value 1 is equal to G3. All right, and we'll say value 1 pitch is equal to A3. Okay, so now when I do this, it should select all of the notes. And let me just switch this to OR. So it's going to select all the notes that are G3 or A3 within the cycle. Okay. Let me just see if I switch that. Okay. Let's see if we can come over here. We'll say inside cycle. Okay, let me just. Okay, so I'm going to see if we do this. Okay, so we're going to set this to OR. So we're going to say select select G3 in cycle. Right, so I'm going to save this real quick. So. Okay, so now we'll just come over here. We'll say select G3 in cycle, select so we do this. Okay, and that selects the correct note, and let's try select A3 in cycle. Okay, so what we want to do is kind of to move this over. So I'm going to start with this measure or this event kind of range selected, and I have my grid set to bar in this case. So let's go ahead and build a macro. So we'll go to our key commands and we'll do new macro. Okay, and we'll call this Patrick. Select pitch every other bar. Okay, so I want to come over here. I'm going to hit the navigate to the right. All right, and we will select that. So let's add that command. Let's do locators to selection. So we'll select that function and add that command. All right. And I just want to duplicate. All right, so I think we may have to add this twice. Sorry, let me remove this. All right, so we're going to move it over to, and then let's run our two project logical editors. So we'll go to process logical preset. So we'll add. All right, so if we now try this macro, we'll see if, and I'll just copy this out a couple more times. Okay, so again, select kind of just the range. Let me just see if we have both notes selected here. Check the macro again. All right, let me see if I could just tweak the the logical editor for this. Okay, so let me just tweak the macro here. Let's remove that. All right, so now let's say we select our range and trigger the macro. We'll see if this. So I'll play around with it some more. I don't want to spend like so much time on this, but let me just. But I could tweak it around a little more, Patrick, and see if we can get it sorted out for you. And if you get a chance to always, send like when you have kind of different macro stuff, if you can send a little earlier, that would be appreciated. So I could spend some time on it, but I'll try to figure it out for you, Patrick. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. All right, so I see Greg, MSP3A or Class A, B, or D. So I'm not absolutely sure. I think that they might be Class A, B, but I'm not absolutely sure. I haven't had a chance to actually kind of play with them. All right, so we see Soren in Sweden. Thanks for joining us. I hope your new release is doing well. All right, so we see from Patrick, I was doing an electronic song for a festival. I wonder if there's any inbuilt plugin or function inside Cubase 12 for rhythmic effect or plussing effect. So you might be able to use like the FX modulator. So let's say if I wanted to see if I still have it in. All right, so let's say I have just like a little pad sound. So on this pad sound, I'm just running the FX modulator. So say if we solo the pad, so the pad is actually just and then what I've done is taken like the volume control and we could just kind of draw in. So if I wanted the volume to change. Or if we wanted to change like the panning over 2 measures. And then, like if you wanted to change like the stereo width to make something sound wider. So maybe just experiment with like the, experiment with the FX modulator because you could just kind of modulate different sources. So if you wanted this to be. So again, this is just like a very simple pad sound. So as soon as you're just kind of, but then we could add kind of rhythmic pulsing directly here using the FX modulator. So play around with that. And then you get all sorts of great stuff for doing kind of like, different EDM festivals. All right. All right, so we have a question from Mike Rivera. Hello, Greg. How can I send vocals to another track for processing? I tried grouping, but it didn't show me to pan my vocals anymore. So what you probably did accidentally was when you sent it to a group, is you sent it maybe to a mono group. So let's say if I wanted to come to this project, and we'll have some vocals. So let's say we'll come here.
The day we first met, that was a long, long
So if I select this, and let's say I'm going to send it to a group channel, and I have it set as a mono.
Yellow coach, ferry us home.
So now when I come here on this group channel,
it caught my breath.
That it's not going to allow you to pan. So what you want to do is make sure that when you send it to a group channel, that it's actually the configuration is going to be set as a stereo group, and then your panning should carry right over for you. So make sure that your group is actually set to stereo, and then I think you'll be okay, Mike. All right, so we have from Concepts of Music Production. Can you show us how we can use direct routing and create summing situation inside of Cubase, and also possibly using outboard summing with that feature? So as we're working on, let's say we have multiple sources. So let's say if we wanted to take, we have. Let me just go back to this project here. So if we have a number of effect sends here, or let's say groups rather. So we'll come over here to group channels, and let's say I wanted to add 8 stereo groups. Okay. So, and if we wanted to use direct routing for this, we could come over and we'll go to our main mixer. The first thing we want to do is go to the racks and make sure that we have direct routing activated here. So this will give us a number of different sources. And if we go to this little drop-down menu, we can go to direct routing summing. So at this point, if I wanted to, we'll select all of my audio tracks. So just come here. We're going to select all of my audio tracks, and I'll just activate Q-Link in my mixer. I can now send them to group 1. And to group 2. To group 3. Group 4. And we can send it to, let's say, group 5. And then we could choose to activate. Now, this way we could create parallel paths. So, and, like I saw, there's a video that was posted recently that, the video creator, it's like direct routing. I don't get it, So often when people will use direct routing is, one, they could automate kind of the changes. And, I think the point that the video creator was making is that you could just use sends, but a lot of times you may be using multiple sends on particular tracks. But let's say, for instance, so I could take all these tracks and route them to all the groups. So if we had like a hearback monitoring system, and I needed to send the sources to group tracks, and those group tracks are going to different outputs that are feeding a headphone monitoring system. That this is obviously kind of the best way to get 16 outputs, from Cubase that will be fed out into the hearback system, so that all the tracks are being fed to 16 different outputs. Because we could have multiple outputs in sends, but again, your sends are often going to be used for effects. So here we could have kind of just like a classic large format console where you could do all of your busing to different stems here. Now, each of these groups that you're sending to could go to different summing devices. It could go to headphone monitoring sources. So each of these groups, what we would do is send these to, to different outputs. So if you had 16, if you had 64 outputs, you could take 16 outputs here, your 8 stereo direct routing, and feed that directly into your headphone monitoring system. So while you can kind of feed groups from sends, again, you're going to run into situations where those don't really add up, where if you're using 7 effect sends, you need to use 4 groups. You could use a direct routing to do that instead. All right, so you see Patrick asked, Greg, a little bit confused with the step sequencer on MIDI effects. Can you explain that? So let's go take a look. I'll just revert this quickly. So we come back, it'll be. Okay, so let's jump back to this project. Let's say we want to do, all right, so let's say I have a synth bass sound. All right, so we can think of the step sequencer as almost like its own little MIDI sequencer. So we'll come over here to our MIDI inserts, and let's go to step sequencer, or step designer rather. So now I will just come over here, and you could always kind of experiment with like different preset configurations. So let's say, okay, I want to come over here to a particular sequence. So let's say as we're playing this, all right, let me just. So as you just kind of come over here, and you could have kind of different MIDI notes that would trigger different phrases. So I hit different MIDI notes here. So let's go ahead and but you could also just kind of, and I want these notes to be louder. So this will just allow you to have, and if you wanted to, just come over here and have maybe different MIDI CCs that could trigger different messages. So you could just kind of draw it in, and then whatever tempo you have. So let's say if okay, I want this to be 120. That will just automatically synchronize with that. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Crystal Coast, North Carolina. All right, so we have a question from Mike Weiser. Question, the ruler where the cycle markers can be placed, can that be stretched or resized vertically for future Cubase updates? I'll mention that as kind of a desire to make that bigger. And what some people will do also is just to add maybe a ruler track in different areas of the program. So this way you could see it even larger if you wanted to. And the rulers could also show different times. So if you want to see different time divisions, or if you want it to be all the same, so you could have a ruler track directly underneath, and then you could have it be pretty big and see. But I'll pass that along as a user suggestion. All right, so we see, hello, my metronome in Cubase 12 comes in about half a bar late every time I start a project from now on. Any idea how to fix it? So one, see if you turn on the constrained delay compensation, if that makes a difference. Sometimes the metronome may come in late if there's a lot of plugins, if you have something like maybe like a room correction system that's imposing a lot of delay or latency on the system. So see if if you have nothing loaded in the project, if the metronome behaves, or if you're working from a template where maybe there's going to be different elements that are taking a lot of latency, that could be affecting it as well. So if you could let us know. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce. He's going to be dropping in and out. He's mixing a project. Thanks for joining us. All right, so a question, is there a way to have more bar in a horizontal slide bar, maybe minimize the amount of measures in default project? So if you come directly to, so I think it's this bar here, just make sure. So if it's this bar, what you want to do is just go to your project menu and go to project setup, and then you could adjust duration. So let's say I set this to 2 minutes and hit OK, that this bar gets bigger. So just go to your project menu to project setup, and it defaults to 10 minutes. So you could set it there, and that will change the size of the horizontal scroll bar that you see. And sometimes people, can, I remember we're working with Eric Johnson's engineer, Richard Mullen, who did like all the great Stevie Ray Vaughan records, and he could only zoom in like this much. And I looked in his project setup, and he had the project set for 24 hours. So, but yeah, just adjust it in the project setup. Okay, so we see from Gadiz, says regarding his previous question, I think this was with controllers, when you click on the velocity button, bottom left inside the MIDI editor, there's a menu that pops up. It should have a setup button. I used to have it there in Cubase 10.5. All right, so I think if you go here, so there is, if once you click on the plus sign, you could add the additional controllers. So if you want to see modulation, we could add particular controllers here. So if you want to see, breath control, that, we could see all those different ones right there. So I'm just going to reread the question. So when you click on the velocity button, bottom left, inside the MIDI editor, there's a menu that pops up. It should have a setup button. So maybe it's just to the left directly here. And then that should, if you're looking to automatically see different controllers, you could do that. And you could also, just pick whatever controllers that you want to see. So once you just come here, you could just kind of, have your different controllers right there. So let me know if the plus sign is what you want to see. Okay, so we just see a question. Are there key commands that can be assigned to change between all the different types of record enabled functions without having to go into the preference menu? All right, so let's take a look. So you might cycle between them. So let's say, let's come over here. Let's take a look and see if we go to preferences. And we'll say VST. And I just want to make sure I'm in the right area. All right, so let's say, let's see what happens if we just come to the key commands again. So we get preferences. VST, and we have auto monitoring, and I have it set up, and I'm not sure if this is Command Option M. So if you do that particular keyboard shortcut, as you hit the keyboard shortcut, I can say auto monitoring, it will cycle through all of your different auto monitoring styles. So again, just come over here to key commands and go to preferences to VST and go to auto monitoring, assign a keyboard shortcut to that, and then that will, and you can see just kind of right here in the center, that will just allow you to switch between your different monitoring styles right there. All right, so you see a question from Patrick. Greg, inside FX modulation or FX modulator, can I copy paste modulation lines or duplicate lines? I tried, but it's not working. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so I'll just come over here. Let's add. Here, I'll just draw some in here real quick. Sorry. All right. All right, so I know we could duplicate the curve like so. So maybe duplicating the curve. Yeah, so I think you could duplicate the curve. So, and that might be kind of the intention of it. So since, but let's see if we come here. All right, so say we copy, then paste. So you can copy just by right clicking. So say if I select these, let's copy this and say I want it in here and paste. But let's say if I do a new module, so you can copy and paste between different modules if you wanted to. So let me just add. So, but I mean, maybe if you just kind of work on, just duplicating it, if just let me know if that kind of works for you. But you go just kind of draw it in. All right. So we see the question about the Dolby Atmos mixing. So we'll get to that later and kind of the emailed in questions. All right. All right. So we have Spike Williams checking in from Wales, I believe, from maybe his new house in Tynewood in the Rhondda Valley. All right. And we have Keonora Music from Perth, Australia. So just helping out a friend who's going back to Perth from Nashville. All right, so we see, hi Greg, when I tried to do pitch shift in envelope in Cubase 12, I only have a range of 11 semitones plus or minus, whereas in the previous version, the range was 16 semitones. Is this a setting I need to adjust? I don't think it's adjustable, and I think it had changed earlier, like a few versions ago. So, but let me just test it and make sure that there's nothing. So we go to process to pitch shift. So we do. So it looks like the range here. Is 48 semitones. So let me know which version you're running, but it looks like it's 48 semitones and not limited to 11 or 12. So, and that's in 12.05.2, the current version. So let me know if that's what you see. All right, and we're glad that Keonra Music from Perth could make it at 2:15 a.m. So thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. Hi, with Alt double clicking in the send areas in the channel and edit window calls up the associated effect. Is it possible to program that functionality into the MIDI remote? Okay, so let's take a look. So let's say we have, I'll just add some effect sends to this particular track. So we'll add an effects channel. So we'll do a reverb. Let's do a delay. All right, so we have these. So let's go to my MIDI remote setup, and I'll just kind of pop over to, say, my Korg, and I'll do new mapping page. Okay, so I want, let's say, this button. And let's say we will go to selected track. Let's go to send slots, slot 1. Okay, so we can enable it. All right, so let's say we have the enable here. Let's see what this will probably just turn it on. All right, so over here, so we can turn it on and off. Let's see if we can get that open with the MIDI remote. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to go to our reverence or revelation. So this way I could say edit channel settings here. And let's say for my mod machine delay, I wanted this to be 2. All right, so now we could just kind of come over here and have, okay, let's see. All right, let's see if we can tweak that some more. So let's say mix console. All right, and see if we could, it's maybe just going to show up under. I don't think that's going to do anything with it, but let's test it. right, so let me just play with this a little more. Say we go to, let's see if we do select a track, and we should be able to go to maybe. All right, so there we can enable, let's see if we go to the mix console. Go to the mixer bank zone. And we'll select our reverb return. Yes, I don't see a way. I'm probably just having maybe a brain cramp way of doing it, but let's see if we could maybe do it in the older. Let's see if we go to our studio setup, maybe under generic remote, you might be able to do it. So let's say we wanted a particular note here. So just click on MIDI learn. We'll hit a note. And let's see if we can. All right, so it looks like I could do it in a generic remote. And I'll just take a look again, see if we could mimic this again from the generic remote. All right, so we go to send slots. There's no edit there. And let's say if we go to look under mix console, under mixer. Yeah, I'll play around with that a little more, but I'm not seeing in easy way, but I could be having a brain cramp moment with that. So, but I'll play around. If you want to email me to at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, so we have Terry Gray checking in from Minneapolis. All right, so we have Fred West from Asheville, North Carolina, home of Moog. So one of my first trips I ever did for Steinberg was to Asheville. All right, so we see from Hijack Sonar, Steinberg download assistant isn't working. Maybe a different topic, not to be asked here, but I wanted to evaluate Dorco. My trial period is already over, so I couldn't use it at all. So you could always, I think if you just go to the Steinberg website, you could always download directly from there. So let's say, I know that there is the Cubase trial version that you could download directly from the website as well. So let's see if we could. Just look at. So if you go to Dorfco for updates and downloads, we'll see if it's in there. But you could just simply come right here to this page and download the latest version directly from the website. But the download assistant is kind of working for most people. But if it's not working for you, just go directly to. You can find a Dorco 4 download section, and then you could see the straight downloads right there. And if you want to send me an email, we could see if maybe I could get your trial version extended. I could reach out to the Dorco team for that. So, and you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. So we have Thomas Soley checking in from the Philippines as a former Pro Tools user. Thanks for being online, or is it probably really early in the morning there? All right, so we have a question about the chord track from Elizabeth. I want to change the scale from C1 to C2 in the chord editor, but I can't find a way to do it. How can I do that? All right, so let's say we're in a chord track. Let's go to setup voicing. So say you want to change it from C1 to C2. So let's say we just we select the chord track and go to setup voicing and say lowest root note, choose C2 instead of C1 right there. So let me know if that works for you, Elizabeth. Thanks for being on the live stream. All right, wonderful to see Uno Memento from Finland. All right, so we have a question. Are there a way to glue some files together by using render in place? All right, so let's say we have a number of files. And let's say I wanted all of these files to be kind of glued together using render in place. So all you had to do is come up to render in place. So I'll just select these particular files. All right, I'll just do a new project here real quick, just show this. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So we'll just show some different rendering in place options. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I got a couple loops and I wanted to kind of join these together and glue them together. So really all you have to do is you go to edit and go to render in place, go to render settings, and for the mode, just switch this to one event. And now when we come here, click render, and if I didn't have it armed, so we'll just do this again. So now we have one event. Now you could also kind of do the same thing for this if you just go to audio and choose bounce selection and replace the events, then everything could be one contiguous event like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so Benny wants people to bang the like button. So all right, so we see, is there scale control in 12 artist? Like if I only wanted to do notes in a Phrygian or Dorian mode. So I think it's going to be the same in Cubase Artist as in Pro, where if we have a MIDI track, and once you open the editor that you have the scale assistant. So at this point you can say, okay, I want this to be in D, and then you could choose your different modes. So if you'd say, okay, I just want to come over here, I only want this to be notes in D Phrygian. So I think that the scale assistant is in artist as well. So, but once you do that, you could just set up to do all of your edits in D Phrygian mode. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so you just see, hi Greg, my question is how can we downmix a Dolby Atmos track we made in Cubase 12 Pro since exporting to ADM is no problem, but no matter you can't, you can send out of the renderer to a new stereo track, not possible in Cubase 12 Pro, and we how to get a full Dolby mix. Let me see if I remember. There's a little trick to doing it, and I may not remember, so see if I have a quick. All right, so let's say we have this going in. Let me just check my audio interface settings here. All right, so if we go here to our channel, so I think it's something, and I may have to explore this a little more, but it's something like as we do in the mix down window. All right, so we have this. Yeah, I can't remember. There is a little way to kind of do the binaural down mix, but I'll see if I can have it kind of figured out for Friday's live stream. I know you sent it in advance, but I didn't get a chance to research that particular topic. But I know I've done it before, and I think if you search the live stream, that if you search the Cubase index, that we did it in a previous live stream. I just can't remember the exact process for that. Sorry, but and I'll try to maybe respond to your email directly. Okay. So we have a question, can I use Cubase for podcast production? So certainly it's just going to be, it's just audio editing. So you can have all your multi-tracks and be able to do, all of your edits, and you could do routing for, doing different side chains. So if you want to have ducking and stuff like that, but there is like Wavelab, it has a program called Wavelab Cast, which is like really a dedicated tool for podcasting, and will allow you to deliver to different types of podcast delivery services. So but all the editing you could do in Cubase as well. So. All right. All right, so we see from Danny, help, my auto audition for loops disappeared in my edit screen. So let's say if we're here and we have our loops area, so let's say, okay, and we're listening to our different loops. So let's say as we listen to, so if we don't see this particular area, all right, let's see if there's, okay, that's on the transport. Let's see if there's a way to just hide. All right, so let me just see if there's, so if this is gone, and just make sure I'm reading this. So my auto audition for loops has disappeared. So I'm not sure if it's the whole area has disappeared, or if if it's just not automatically playing. So if it's not automatically playing, we could see it here, but let's take a look, see if there's, excuse me, I'm just going to clear my throat. All right, so one of the things that you could try to do is to, so let's say we're in our control room. Hang on, just want to clear my throat again. I'm just going to get a quick glass of water. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. All right, so let's see if maybe it's tied to like a global media bay. I don't think it is, but let's see. So if we hide the previewer here, if the previewer is hidden, it seems to be independent. All right. And let's see if we. So there is, if you don't see like the loops at all, it could be just that like maybe the media is when you go to the visible items. But let me know if it's just this preview area on the bottom that's not showing up. Or if it's like, it seems like from your description, maybe it's just this little area that's not showing up. So if you could maybe just confirm that for me, that would be. But if you just click here, this would do the auto audition without that turned on. With this turned on, then you can audition all your different loops. All right. Wonderful to see David Reuter and Kristen Parisi. Hope you guys are doing well. And we have Rude Screen checking in from the UK and Razol from Denmark. Thanks for being on. My chat field just jumped, so. Okay, so. All right, so you see Fabian just reminded me that so we need to add the parenthesis in for the jump back to like for the MIDI editor. So thank you for my brain cramp reminder. So let's say if we wanted to select both the G3 and A3, in this case, we'll just do the little brackets. So let's say if we're here and I just wanted to select the G3 and A3 on these particular notes, let's go back to our logical editor setup and back to that preset. But just having brain cramp on having too many brain cramps today. All right, but there is a way of just kind of doing to add. I'm not sure if we. But yeah, you could add kind of brackets for the. Okay, so let's say we're going to do. All right, so now let's see if that selects the G3 and A3 together. So you could set the brackets to do that. So I'll get back to you, Patrick, on that, but thanks for that. All right, so we see, Greg, when I back up a project, sampler track files are not copying over. Others in the forum have had the same issue for a long time now, and still it's not fixed. When will we get this fixed? All right, so let's go ahead and just do new project. All right, so we'll take a loop. And we'll create a sampler track for that. Okay, so now we look at our pool window and we'll see sampler track right there. So let's do a backup. Give it a new folder. Okay, so let's close this project and go to our desktop and see if it opens up. So it looks like that that recalled correctly. Let's take a look at, so we can go to our pool window. We still see the particular sampler track. So let me make sure I read it correctly. But let me know, Messabog too, if I did something differently. All right, so a question from Rich. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to convert existing markers with text included to cycle markers, or will I have to add cycle markers separately and copy the text from each marker? Thanks. So I think that you could probably create a macro to double click. Let's say if we had, let's say markers. So let's say we add a marker track. And if we have, let's say, a marker here and a marker here, that you could, if you double click, that you could, at this point, hit the letter P and then create a cycle marker. You could select the range between two markers probably, so you could double click and do that, but there isn't an automatic way because they're two separate types of files. They're both markers, so there isn't a way to take two markers. I mean, you could just double click with the range selection tool between them and create a macro, but it's not going to necessarily copy the text from the marker names into the cycles. But it's not that bad. Okay, so we see DJ Mad. Will there be a Cubase update this year? So if I was to guess, I would say yes, but I can't really specify or speculate as to when it might be out or share any information before it's released, because I could be under a non-disclosure agreement. So. All right, so we see I am new to synths and I find choosing synths a very difficult process. Do you have any suggestions as to which synth or set of synths I should go for? Was thinking Arturia's, they have a DX7 emulator. So it really depends. There's going to be analog synths that kind of mimic, traditional analog synthesizers where you have oscillators that are modulated and filtered. And then you're going to have digital synths that are going to be, we could think of the DX7. It's kind of the first of that generation, produced by Yamaha. And there's going to be, and then you could have kind of, so that's an FM synthesizer. Then you have kind of romplers. We could think of like a Korg M1, which is in like, maybe, a D50 where you're going to have, tiny bits of samples that are combined and then get run through filters. So those are all kind of different beats. So if you want like a DX7 type synth, I would, unless you're in a hurry, I would maybe wait a month or so. So there could be some interesting things coming. But if that's kind of, so figure out what kind of instrument you want. And from there, so if you want to do more sample manipulation, kind of like a granular synth, you could do pad shop. If you're looking for virtual analog synths, Retrolog is very powerful for that. And if you want it kind of, classic 80s digital synths, there's a lot of great options for that. But if you're waiting for a DX7, just, I would hang out just a little bit if you could. So, see, Benny's daughter is turning 14 tomorrow. Wish her a happy birthday for us. All right. All right. All right, so we see Robbie just says, want to thank me and Jazz Dude for all his amazing work and helping with this ASIO problem a while ago. So, all right, so we see Greg philosophy question from Patrick. What makes some win, don't in music industry, like someone with great knowledge, can't make someone with makes huge hits? What's the cause? What you think? So a lot of it is luck. And, there's a lot of times, like talking to, many of my friends that toured and are great sidemen, it's like you want to be the guy you can get along with well on the bus, treat people well. So, and a lot of times perseverance, I've seen, like I'm good friends with Peter Frampton and, when he wasn't, when his popularity kind of lulled for a bit, he still went out and did concerts and worked it and he built up his audience. I remember kind of after I met him, he was playing like a 1,500 seat arena and, of a club. And then within, just because he kept doing that and delivering a great show and people liked what he was doing, I saw him within 5 years selling out, like 20,000 seat arenas and huge outdoor festivals like shed tours is what they call them in the US, like pavilions, like often the summer concert series. And so I saw him go from like playing a club for 500 people to playing for 20,000 people at Wolf Trap outside of DC, and just because he kept earning it all the time. So but a lot of it's luck. You just meet the right person. Sometimes you get a hit single and you could milk it for a long time. So, all right. So we see, how do you math script movements in knobs, sine curves, etc., and link them? All right, so if you wanted to draw in, like, for synth parameters, so let's say if we had an instrument track, so let's say, okay, we'll have just a quick synthesizer. If you wanted to just go to, so let's say if you have notes, and let's say if you wanted to do, so I'm not sure when you say, so math, script movements, and knobs. So, any of the knobs in the instrument can be controlled remotely. So let's say if I come here and I wanted the fine tune here. So I'm going to right click and then we'll say we will show the automation track. So as soon as I do this, we could go to our drawing tool. And then we could just say, okay, I want to do sine waves. And if you hold down the shift key, you could change the frequency of those to occur over time. So, or if you wanted to just, come directly over here, so we'll just activate. So, or now if you wanted to choose, excuse me. some triangle waves. So, and you could, just simply map these to the grid. So we could just snap this to the grid and be able to say, I want 2 repetitions per measure. So that's how you could kind of do. So, so I'm not sure if, so this would control, different. So if I want to do square waves on particular parameters, and we could pick, the amplitude. And if I wanted to now make it kind of shorter, we could, change the amplitude of it and the frequency. So you could do stuff like that. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish. But again, you could just go to the drawing tool and select between different drawing tool shapes. All right, so Mike Rivera asks, Greg, I have one more question. I saved drums in Groove Agent and I can't find them. Can you help? So probably what you would do is, like, let's say we go to our control room or to media, and go to user presets, and then go to instrument, VST instrument presets, and they're probably just going to show up directly there. So that's where like your saved drum kits will go. So if I come over, let's add an instrument, Groove Agent. And I'll take this and I'll just make a quick kit. Okay, so I save this as a preset. So I'll just come right over here. Call Mike Rivera. Okay, so now we come over here to user presets, VST instrument presets, and there's the preset right there that you've created. So again, just kind of look in your user presets area. Okay, so I have a question. Is it possible to select all events in the track when you select said track? And I know it's possible the other way around. Event selection also selects the event, but this would help a lot. So there is a command. So let's say if I have a loop here, so it may not be like when you select, but it could be just a keyboard shortcut that you hit. So let's say I have a loop, and this loop is repeated numerous times. So if you just come here, one of these, if you hold down Shift and double click on the first event, that will select all the events. But there's also if you just go to Edit to Select, and there's a Select All on all unselected tracks. So you could do that, but it's not kind of automatically tied to like the event selection, and that could get you in trouble. But so Shift double click, I think, is not so hateful. I know that we could have a preference where we select the event that the track is selected. Or just on a particular track, just go to Edit, and you could assign a keyboard shortcut to this for select all unselected tracks, and that would select everything on that particular track, but nothing automatically does that. All right, wonderful to see Nick on the live stream. All right. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see a question, Greg, is Cubase more demanding DAW in the market? Doesn't it works with budget-friendly equipment? So, Cubase is probably the most democratic application on the market. I think it works with more plugins and more audio interfaces, because we invented ASIO, we invented VST. So, if you have a slow computer that's not well set up or configured, it's not going to work well on any DAW. So I don't think Cubase is more demanding than any other DAW. I think DAWs themselves are demanding on the projects or demanding on computers. And, it's maybe not necessarily that the programs are demanding, but people's expectations and how people want to use them. Like when we first came out with Cubase VST, it was 32 tracks, and I was like, oh my goodness, we could never fill 32 tracks. And now we have people doing, 100 different kick drum tracks on a project because they can and can push the envelope. So I don't think Cubase is more demanding than anything else. All right, so we see it'd be nice if Cubase had an auto mute feature where it would mute tracks on which the volume exceeds a certain threshold. So I mean, most people, if you were worried about it getting to a certain threshold, you would just probably, use a compressor, in lieu of that. So I'm not sure if because the volume gets loud, if you wanted to cut off, but you probably could, maybe have let's see if we could even sidechain into a gate. But if you could let me know, I mean, most people to kind of mitigate the, if you had the volume too loud, would just use an audio compressor to change the level. So if you come here and we could do this on the channel strip, all you'd have to do is go to the compressor and say, okay, at this threshold, we want the volume to go down. So that's probably, instead of turning the track off, most people would still want to hear the track, even if it was loud, but just to be able to control the dynamics here with the compressor. So let me know if a compressor would work for you or if doesn't make sense for your workflow. All right, so we have Bruce checking in from Simi Valley, and he's hit the like button, so that's great. All right, so we have a question. Could you teach me how to quantize in 5 and 7? Okay. So I'm not sure if you wanted to quantize like quintuplets. So let's say or septuplets. So let's come over here. I'll just add an instrument track. Okay. All right, so let's say we had a bunch of 16th notes. Okay, and I wanted to quantize these. So let's go to our quantize panel. So here we could just say tuplet. So let's say, okay, now I just had to set to 16th notes. But we could just set our tuplet here and say, okay, I want to do like 8th note quintuplets. And now I could quantize to quintuplets or septuplets. So we could do, so let's say I want to do quarter note septuplets or quarter note quintuplets. So we could just change the tuplet factor directly there. So let me know if that should be able to do 5s and 7s if that's what you mean. Wonderful to see Michael Teams. All right. From a cold, rainy Weatherford, Texas, and he wants people to whack the like button. So we see Patrick says, question about in general, is there any composer who fully compose, records, mix, master inside Cubase? So yeah, lots of composers do. Most of them do. So it's it's pretty common. All right, so I just see. I guess it's a question. There's a way to toggle in a macro the show hide of a plugin in a control room. So I think if we go to, so let's say we have our control room set up here. So let's say I have my supervision plugin and I want to open it up with a macro or so we could do it, I think, with a generic remote. Let's see if we could just come over here and open up with the MIDI remote. So let's go to the MIDI remote here and say, okay, I want to come over here. Let's adjust this. Okay, so I wanted to assign this particular button. Let's see if we can open up that supervision. So let's go to control room. You may have to do it from the generic remote, but let's see. Okay, so let's go, I think, to the generic remote. So let's say I want this button. So it's not through a macro necessarily, but let's say studio setup, and let's go to generic remote, and I want this to go to VST control room, and we wanted to do strike command, and then to VST control room. Okay, and then we go to like supervision here and just say edit. So now we'll have this particular MIDI note. As soon as I come over here, we can now edit the particular control room. So it's not a macro necessarily, but if you want to trigger it from MIDI, you could have it set up directly for that. All right, wonderful to see Val Lee from Vienna. All right, let me see. All All right, so we see that about the quintuplets and septuplets. You can tell the stack to put those into a preset. So you could save your own presets and call it up as well. And how to do like the grid in quintuplets and septuplets. So let's say if we want to see the grid here, so let's go to like our metronome pattern. So let's say right now we're in 4/4. If I come here to my click pattern editor, we can say I want this to be represented in quintuplets. And then I think we could right click here and use the metronome click pattern as the emphasis. So we now can see our grid lines showing up kind of in quintuplets there as well. So check out with where we could do this for, so if you want to have quintuplets, and then you can right click and use the metronome click pattern level for the grid line emphasis, and then you can see the grid lines will now be quintuplets or septuplets. All right, so we have Chris Jr. live from Uganda. So thanks for joining us, Gugo Beats. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. It says I need hydration, so I try not to drink so much water before the live stream. Otherwise, I'll have to take a bathroom break, which I don't want to do. So that's why sometimes I may be thirsty throughout a live stream, just so I don't have to have an interruption. So I see that Michael Teams is granted 1 gallon of lemon meringue pie ice cream for my family and myself. Thank you. Okay, so we see routing to use a vocoder. So generally, if you have like a plugin that is like a vocoder plugin. So let's say I don't have a vocoder on mine, but let's say I'm going to just put a plugin as an insert here that will take. So I'm going to go to pitch correct. And what you need to do is once you have the plugin activated, and if that plugin kind of takes MIDI like a vocoder would, is just to add a MIDI track and then set its output. So right now we see that we have our pitch correct plugin. So if we kind of look through here, I think this accepts MIDI. But you'll see like the MIDI output here for the particular track, and set that to the particular plugin. So let me just. That may not have MIDI input. Thought it did, but let me just take a look on the destination here. Okay, so I know Loop Mash FX would have it. So let's say if we're here and we go to open up Loop Mash FX. So let's say this is our vocoder. We could take our MIDI output ports, and then we could just simply send that to the Loop Mash FX output right here. So once you add the plugin, then add a MIDI track, and then you could just simply send it directly to the correct MIDI port here. So you can see that we're going to take this. This one here is the Loop Mash MIDI input. If you look at the little pop-up window, and this is going to be for pitch control for the pitch correct. So just add a MIDI track and send the MIDI destination to the vocoder that's loaded onto another track. All right, so Dal Solaru asks, in the arranger track, is there any way to name the events instead of just A, B, C, etc.? All right, so if we add an arranger track, all All right, so we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All right, so we're here. What you want to do is hold down the Alt or Option key and double click and intro. Alt or Option key, double click, verse 1. So that's all you have to do, and then that's how you can rename. So just hold down the Alt or Option key and double click and type the name in. All right, my chat field just jumped. We just have lots of questions in my future. Okay, so I'm in the neighborhood. All right, so we have Walter Till checking in from Austria. All right, you see Gareth just mentioned he's been doing a comparison between the Steinberg de-esser and a big name expensive brand. All right. All right, so we have a question. Is there an option to turn off all plugins, not bypass, from a channel, inclusive bypassing the channel strip? Okay. All right, so let me just jump to a different project here. All right, so let's say I have a lot of plugins on this particular track. Okay, so we go to inserts. So let's say if I want to come here, we could bypass the plugins. So that's not what you want to do. So I think if we go to, let's say, our large mixer, and let's jump to the inserts. I think if we come here, that so I think that this might turn off the particular plugins and as opposed to bypassing. But let me just see if we come here. But I think if we go into the mixer, at this, let me see if it's a modifier key. All right, so this looks like maybe the same function. And let's see if there's in the project logical editor, I think it may just turn off the plugins. Let's say close the mixer here real quick. And let's see if we set the property. So here it's bypass. But I think that there is a way in to do it in the large format console. So say if I have this on, so it's bypass. Let me just take a look in, but I think there's a modifier key to do it in the main mixer. Just trying to remember. I'll make a note to cover that for Friday's live stream as well. Sorry about that. All right, so I just see a question. It says, just started watching, but I'm now getting a no valid license from Nuendo. The activation manager is also not responding. Is there a solution to this? So often, a lot of people run into the problem. Maybe they're not logged in to their account. Often, like 95% of the time, most people just restarted their computer and then it works. But sometimes you may be logged out of your user account from your My Steinberg account in the upper right-hand corner. So, all right, so you see a question. Hey, Greg, is it possible to get the chords based on a piano track with melody quickly, or do I have to create a chord track and play them in manually? So if you have like a chord part, whether it's audio or MIDI, so let's say if you have a piano part, really all you have to do is let me just find project here. Okay. So you don't have to play the chords in again. So let's say we have a chord track here. You could just drag the piano, whether it's audio or MIDI, and drag it right up. Or you could just select the event and go to project. And we go to chord track and we say chords to MIDI. And that will create just kind of the chord track. But you could just kind of come right over here. Let's do that again. Or create chord events rather. Do that. And then it'll extract the chords directly from your particular project, from MIDI or audio directly right there. If it has melody, you should be fine with that as well. See, Gareth is telling people not to drop the CD. They're not that indestructible. So they lied in the 80s. Yeah. Okay, just reading through comments. See, Gareth just says, Bernie Marsden, guitarist of Whitesnake, owes all his wealth to being co-writer of Here I Go Again, but he had a lifetime as a guitarist and occasional writer before he hit gold. So, yeah. Okay, so Michael Teams question. I received a Behringer X-Touch 1 controller and have it installed, but it pretty much mimics the CC121. How do I assign its buttons and knobs to do something else? So you may be having it, one is to, if you have it set up as a Mackie control, is maybe, if you go to your Mackie control and set it to not connected or not connected to the Behringer. Then once you have that, that just kind of opens you up to utilizing it as a MIDI remote profile. So you could create a MIDI remote and have it do and customize to do anything you want. But by default, it generally runs under Mackie control. But if you have the option to just turn off Mackie control, so it's not kind of automatically assuming that entire protocol, then you could just come and start mapping it freely out here. So you could just, come and click on plus, and then you could say, okay, it's a Behringer, it's going in and out of these MIDI ports, and then move the particular, knobs. You could, basically create that in software. So you say, okay, I want it to come here, and, it's a Behringer, and it's going in and out. So we'll say X1, and it's going in and out of like this MIDI port. And then you could just say, okay, I want to take my 8 faders, assign it to this. I have knobs. I want to assign this. I have rotary encoders, so, and then you could basically mimic, move the slider, move the knob, and that will automatically populate. And you could basically build a control. And then when you go to the mapping page, the mapping assistant, you could then map particular functions to that. All right, so we have Rohan checking in from Jamaica, so that's great. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see Rohan ask, hey, Greg, trying to mix some vocals. How do you create group channels so I could start adding effects? So you don't even have to add group channels to add effects. So if you wanted to add an effect, let me just get rid of one on this. I'll just revert this project. So, if you want to add effects, and I'll just turn off, I think I have one. All right, so let's say I get rid of this. So we'll have like our dry reverb. So just select the channel, and then if you wanted to just add an effects channel to the track, we could just say, okay, I want to add a reverb. So say, okay, I want to do reverence, and then we could create it outside the folder that will place it. So you could just now come over here, say, okay, I want a plate. So that's, you can add an effect. You can also send it to a group channel, and on the group channel as an insert, add an effects, add an effect send or add an insert, add an effect plugin as an insert, but just use like the effect sends. So again, just come right over here, select and say, okay, I want to add effects channel to, and you can do that for multiple channels at once, and then you could vary the amount via the send. So as you look at it, you can say, let's go to this track. I want to go to the sends. So if I want a dryer, so try that, and I think that would be a kind of a more direct approach to it. Instead of like having to do 2 or 3 steps, you could just do it all in one. All right. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see question, is there any way to bypass instruments like the way we could bypass inserts? So right, for audio and instrument tracks or MIDI tracks, so if you're, I'll just go to a different project here. So all you have to do is, if it's, you have an instrument that's taking up a lot of CPU and you want to just kind of bypass it, is you could just right click. So let's say, okay, this one is taking a lot of CPU, right click and disable selected tracks. Then that will kind of unload the particular instrument, and then we could enable selected tracks just like that. So. See, Michael Teams just says, I go back and watch these later and realize how much he missed due to Greg's expertise. Thanks for the pause and backup buttons. Yeah, so I think it's a good format for that. Wonderful to see Gerald Elia on from California. Hope you're well and hope everything's dried up for you. All right, so we see I want to automate it during playback. I guess this is about bypassing instruments to give some room for my potato laptop. So if you have VST3 instruments, one of the cool things you could do is, if you, instead of like, enabling, disabling tracks, but one of the cool things you could do with VST3 instruments is if you go to preferences and we go to plugins, is you could activate suspend VST3 plugin processing when no audio signals are present. So if the instrument's not playing any sounds, like maybe you have 4 instruments during the verse and you have 4 instruments during the chorus and they're different. Instead of having 8 instruments loaded, the 4 instruments take CPU while it's playing in a verse, and then while they're not playing in the chorus, the other instruments will just play. And that way, only the plugins that are passing and generating audio will actually do any processing. So if you have a lot of VST3 plugins, that's a great consideration for that. So. Right. My chat field just jumped on me, so. All right, so I think I'm back. Okay, so Michael Teams, today I'm going to start with an empty slate and just play with the chord track. How do I start? All right, so if I was just kind of starting off a project, I would maybe like get a drum beat, get a loop, something just to kind of have playing is maybe kind of more inspiration. And we'll just come over here, documents. And a lot of times I like to just kind of work with like a Rhodes patch. So let's say, I have So like if I was just kind of starting and, you know, trying different chord progressions, I may just kind of, if I was just starting my project, I may just and try different chords. So say, okay, I want to come here. So now you could just say go to like, okay, I want to figure out a chord. And maybe just say, okay, I want to take this. And you could double click on a chord and go to the chord assistant. And you could look at it kind of based on proximity. And say, okay, I want to go to a chord assistant for this. And basically, the farther you get out, the less related harmonically it is. Or you could look at it based on the circle of fifths. So you could just kind of do stuff like that and say, okay, even if you want to just start from scratch and just say, okay, I just want to try, you know, like, because we all know, like, as guitar players, piano players, people will always kind of start in a rut. So say, okay, we do C, all right, and then just come over here, click on the plus, that will place the chord on the next measure. Say, okay, I want to go C to G. And then I want to go to D, and then I want to turn around to go. So let's say, okay. So maybe we'll do. So it's a great way of, you know, just trying out different chord progressions that you normally wouldn't attempt or try. And, you know, because we all know it's so easy to get into musical ruts and, you know, just say, okay, you know, like I have this and what would be a good chord to go in between? And you can say, okay, let's try, I could look at cadence, I could look at common notes and say, oh, maybe a G minor would work there as well. To go into the D minor. So, you know, just experiment. So I usually will just kind of take, you know, a different instrument, and you could take this instrument that it's actually going through. And let's say if we even could go through like a MIDI insert. And say, okay, I just want this to be eighth notes. Or do something different, like, okay, I just want to do like eighth note triplets. So you could do all sorts of great fun stuff with that. So that's how I would just kind of play around and try chords that you would never do. Like, I think maybe your primary instrument is a guitar. I know you play guitar, but, you know, just think of chords not from a guitarist perspective. All right, so we have a big fan of Twister saying hello. All right, so we have a question from Jamie Hosmer. Can you take us through using Cubase audio to MIDI for drum replacement? So yeah. Okay, this is really easy and simple to do inside of Cubase. So let's say we have our project. So I want to take, let's say in my project I have an instrument loaded up, which is just going to be a Groove Agent kit. All right, so all I'm going to do is, while we're playing, I'm going to go to the kick track here. And let's find our hit points. Let's edit our hit points. And we want to make sure that these are kind of not including like other tracks that are bleeding through. And then we'll see this little create tab. And we want to say, let's create MIDI notes. I'm going to put it onto C1, and we're going to put it onto the first selected track. And we could retain the dynamic velocity. And now I hit OK. So now I'm going to mute the kick drums. And now it's just playing the kick in Groove Agent. So if I want to take that and or change the tuning. And then we could blend it with the original 3 kick tracks here. So that's really all you had to do. So again, just double click, go into the hit points. You'll see a little create drop down window, and then choose MIDI notes. And then you could add a new MIDI track or go to the first selected track. And that will automatically just generate the particular kick drum pattern for you in MIDI right there. Okay, so we have a question for Benny. Is it possible to save an arranger track? I would like to back off after a long time. So let's say we add an arranger track here. So we'll just... Okay, so let's say we'll just come over here. So let's say, okay, this will be intro, verse. Okay, so I don't think that the arranger track is obviously kind of saved within the project, and you could have multiple kind of arranger chains as you see fit. You could come over here and create a new chain and have all sorts of other capabilities and be able to switch. But so is it possible to save an arranger track? And it says if I would like it if I would like to back off after a long time. So, if you don't want the arranger track to be active, you could just, if once this is turned off, at that point, it's, now it's going to play back the play order here. But if this is turned off, and I think you could add an arranger track and copy and like literally kind of drag these events into an arranger track on a different project if you need to, but it's going to be mostly project specific, I think. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Okay, so we have Big Fan of Twister checking in from Ohio. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the live stream. See, Nick's spent a whole weekend on Hallian 6. Watched One Man and His Songs Hallian tutorial to uncramp my brain, and boy, what a piece of kit. And now to learn Pesky Wave Lab. So, yeah, the Hallian's incredibly deep. And Gareth says he found layering patches for turns Hallian into a beast. All right. All right, so you see from big fan of Twisters as he's trying to figure out how to make music from movies that I love, like Twister and other movies. So yeah, Twister was actually done by Mark Mancina. He's a big Cubase user, so he used to work with hands, but he's also did Moana and Cars and a bunch of other, I think, planes as well. So he's an incredibly talented composer. He actually lives across the street from Alan Silvestri in Carmel. Not a bad place to be. Okay, great to see Graham Witcher on. We see just... See, nice comment from the soundbar. Thank you very much. All right, so you see from Ed Pacheco. Hi, Greg. I have a song 208 measures long. There are 10 instruments with effects. I want to extend the song by 10 measures by duplicating the last 10 measures of the original song forward. So probably, like, if I was in this case, if I wanted to take like the last section of audio, I would just grab maybe the range tool and say, okay, these are my audio events, and I want to copy those. So select it with the range tool and hit Control or Command D. And then so once you kind of find the in and out points with the range tool, just kind of come right over here, select it, and you could just have the range tool or have it work in combination, but just Command. So once you have it selected, Command D. Or if you wanted to just, take a section, like just these tracks, we could do that as well. So let me know if that's helpful. And then you could extend the range directly here as well. So if you wanted to extend that with keyboard shortcuts, you could do that. See, Uno Memento just says, this comment is mixing is like making a painting. There's always a point that needs to be sharpened, and that's why you never finish when you can't wait to finish. I've painted approximately 100 paintings, know this. Yeah, so I remember going out to a guy's place in Tampa, and he had his recording studio and an art studio together in one of the old cigar factories. And he does like really fine portraits, and I just remember asking him when he's done, and then he's just like, "Oh, it's the worst thing ever," because he could always just add a little bit more. And I remember talking with my friend Bobby Summerfield, who's an amazing engineer and wonderful guy, and he always says mixes are never done; they're just abandoned. So. All right, reading through comments. Okay, from Walter Till, we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to create a group channel for selected tracks inside a folder, and it is automatically placed on top of the selected tracks? So generally, it's going to be placed below. So right now, I have all of these tracks in a folder, all my drums in a folder. All right, and I'll just make these a little larger. So if I have this, so I'll just select all my tracks here like so, and then I'm just going to add a folder. So they're in a folder, and we'll just, okay, so, and add a group channel. So if we just come here and add a group channel to the selected tracks, it doesn't go to the top. And it's kind of mimicking more of kind of a signal flow, because the signal kind of goes, in to out. So it's kind of going, from top to down or left to right within a mix console. But once it's done, you could just simply come right over here and move the group channel up if you wanted to. But it's going to automatically kind of place it into like a group tracks folder that will be created depending on, or at the bottom of the selected track. So, but I guess, and let's see if I take the folder, and I don't think we could add a group track to that, because a folder can contain elements that aren't audio based. But if I say we add a group channel to the selected and I choose create inside folder, that automatically gets put into a group tracks folder. And if we choose outside of folder, when we do this, we could just say, so we'll add our group channel and then just say we're going to create outside folder, and that goes below the last selected, but you could then just move it up if you wanted to for organization purposes. Right. Reading through different. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on. Jazzy just saying he is talking about older dongles. So I still have one for ADB buses with an ADB extension cable. And I still have Atari as well as parallel port dongles as well. All right, we see Gareth is out for quick dinner. All right, slowly catching up here. All right. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. If you copy and paste an event holding Alt plus Shift so that these events are linked, how can you unlink these events? All right, so let me just, I think there's a way of doing it. So let's, all right, so say if I just copy these out. So maybe if we, like if it's for MIDI, let's see if we do a bounce MIDI. think I remember seeing kind of the like seeing a prompt, like when I did something that would automatically make it not linked, like. All right, let me just see if it's. Okay, I'll add that to my long list of stuff to look up for Friday of how to do that. But yeah, like I remember seeing a prompt like when I did some edit that would ask me if I want to make it kind of independent. Let me just take a look, see if there's anything in the preferences for that. I don't think there is. Yeah, okay, I'll make a note to do that to have an answer for Friday's live stream. Sorry about that. Had too many of those today. It's DL White just saying, I'm using Create MIDI notes right now in drums. It's incredibly useful. 30-year-old tracks. Recorded soft drum replacement is another level. Thank you, Steinberg. So yeah, it's a great feature to use. It saves many drum recordings. All right, we see Valley has takeoffs. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on Friday. All right, so DL White says Danny from Fort Worth, Texas, using number one time DAW since VST 3.6. That's great. Okay, so you see Benny's question on the all right, on the arranger track says, I mean, if I have used a flatten, I want to go back to have the parts separated again as it was before I used a flatten. So let me just open up a project that has some arranger track stuff in it. See if it's in my recent list. Yeah. So generally what I do is like if you go into like the arranger track and you go into the settings, when you go to flatten chain, I would have it automatically, if you do it in, I would, just choose to create a new project because then your current project is always, is always going to be the same. And then whenever it's flattened, it's going to, instead of doing it in a current project where you'd have to undo it directly after the fact, I would just do it into a new project, and then your original project is intact, and it generates a new project where everything has actually been, been copied out as if it's going to play straight linearly of your non-linear arranger track. So maybe what I would do in the future is just when you do the destination, set it to new project. All right. So we see from Alex Kai on an audio event in the upper right hand corner, there is a note icon and a W icon. Can you explain what those mean? All right. So when we come here to probably the note icon is going to be that it's in musical mode. So when we see this little note icon, that means that it's going to play back to follow different particular tracks. And I want to say that the other one might be if it's set to transpose, and let's say like the transpose is set to independent. Let me just see if so at this point, if it's set all right, so let's say if we have a transpose track into project, so I'll just add a transpose track. And let's say this event is set for independent, and we have a transposition here. That's when we see this icon. So let me know if those are the icons that you're looking for. If that's what it is. So you have musical mode and another icon with the notes, like 2/8 notes, 2 ascending eighth notes going up. That means it's independent of the transposition track. All right, so we have a question. It says, my question is, how would you approach an issue when 3 developers' products don't play together nicely? Do developers talk to each other to sort this? Any workarounds? Are workarounds the common solution? So often, I know that our developers will be in touch with other developers as issues arise. So many times, that's why there are standards like, VST plugins and ASIO, and Steinberg has been a big proponent of standards over the years, going back to the Atari days when there's, 3 different MIDI like timing scenarios, timing engines. So Steinberg had one. C Lab, which turned into eMagic, which turned into Apple. They had another one, and I think Dr. T's had a different timing engine. And they were all fairly incompatible. So at that point, Steinberg learned that it's better to kind of, to work with standards so that, the customer benefits from it and that they're not kind of stuck on a desert island with a function that doesn't work. But if, you have a particular scenario that you want, so sometimes there's, people would use Rewire, but then Rewire was dropped by propeller heads and they're not ever going to update it for Apple M1 processors. So a lot of companies have dropped it because it's kind of abandonware. So, but if you have a particular scenario, I could, maybe follow up on it. But a lot of times the developers of different companies do have, I know it's like the sales guys of different companies, will be in touch with each other. Marketing people sometimes will be in touch with each other from different companies. And I don't get to hang out with the developers much, but one time when I was in Hamburg on business, they invited me into like a development planning meeting, and I didn't realize how active they were in talking to other companies to come up with solutions. So, but if you have a particular situation, just let me know. All right. So we see from Best Screen Jesus, great to see you on the live stream. How do you print the tempo track to the audio you've detected tempo on? That's cool to know, but people keep asking because they want to chop it up. So let's go take a look. So I'm not sure if all programs are capable of reading more than one tempo. So let's say if I just want to go find my little jazz piece. All right, so let's say, we're here and I'm going to do a tempo detection of it. All right, so we'll go to our project and let's do tempo detection. And let's say, okay, I'll do a quick offbeat correction. All right, so now when we go to the audio file itself, and again, I'm not sure if most programs are, sorry for hitting my mic, are capable of doing this, but we go to the audio and we say audio to advance and we say set definition from tempo. So now this will, and we choose to write definition into the audio files, that all of these tempo changes are now embedded. So a lot of programs may not be able to actually extrapolate or extract that particular information. So what I would do, if someone needed like the tempo map as an audio file, an easy way to do this is just to go to your project menu. Like if they need to have like some form of representation of the tempo, is I would just go to the project menu to signature track and just say render audio click between left and right locators. And then they could have the tempo that's matching, that's extracted as an audio file. And they could match directly up to this. And this could be the tempo source. And if they want to do edits against that, that's an easy way to have an audio file of the tempo. So just, select the event, set the left and hit the letter P to set the left and right locators around it. And at that point, project menu to signature and render audio click between left and right locators. And you could also do a MIDI click. So, whatever's, you could do both. So depending on what they need. So let me know if that's helpful, Best Screen Jesus. And I see you also added, because they want to chop it up and have it aligned with the grid. So I think, so let me know if that is working for you, if that will make sense. All right. Okay, so we see John's backstory says using Reason 12 EST and Cubase Pro 12 Softtube C1 fader drops communication with random channels when loading a saved project. In Cubase 12, it's very repeatable and been reported. Yeah, so the guys from Propellerheads originally started off doing projects for Steinberg. The founder of Propellerheads. When I started Steinberg, he used to write the manuals for Steinberg. But if you have, see if you have the same. Sometimes it's always tricky to isolate this, but if you have another controller or like a MIDI, see if you could control it with MIDI remote, if that works. And then you could see if it's a Reason issue or if it's a Softtube fader issue with that. But sorry you're running into that. That's always no fun. All right. So we see KS Germania has made a couple smashers with Cubase SX version. Okay. Okay, we have just a quick question. Greg, please demonstrate how to use context gate and MIDI gate. Okay, so let's say if I have, let's say I have this particular track, right, and I want to use MIDI gate. So we'll come over. So I'm gonna go to my inserts and we'll put MIDI gate on. So we'll come directly over here to dynamics and let's get to MIDI gate. Okay, so now as we do this, I'm going to create a MIDI track. And we're going to have it automatically go to the MIDI gate plugin. Sorry, I have my wrist pad on top of my computer keyboard. Okay, so this MIDI track is now going out to our MIDI gate. So now as I play a MIDI note, so let's say, all right, let's just see if I have, okay, so now when I will come to my MIDI track, and as soon as I hit a MIDI note, so as soon as it receives the MIDI note, it will automatically turn on. So you don't hear anything, but as soon as the MIDI note is pressed, the audio will pass. So, and if we wanted to switch this to note off or note on, so we could now just, at this point, as we're playing, so we could just kind of switch the different modes here. So as soon as like my MIDI key is pressed, the gate opens up, or you could have it do the opposite. And then you could adjust, like, you know, the release. So as soon as I let go of the key, let's say I let go now. And let's adjust the attack. So while I do this, so let's look at the context gate. I'm not sure if I worked with that one much, but let's go ahead. Let's see if it's, all right, so let's go to our context gate here. I think it's just a MIDI plugin, if I remember right. Okay, so this would just allow you to, you know, if you wanted to switch between, you know, like take monophonic into, let me just go ahead and load up a particular sound on it so we could hear it. All right, so now we'll come here, say I play a 3-voice chord, and we'll go to our MIDI inserts. So this way we could have only, like, no notes are going to play unless 3 notes are played together. So if I play single notes, play 2 notes, I play 3 notes. So you can set kind of the maximum number of polyphony. So you can set kind of different polyphonic modes. And then if you wanted to only... so in this way you could kind of like filter out different conditions, like only 5-note chords can pass. So this way you could just, like, if you have notes that are just, you know, maybe you kind of hit 2 notes at once, and you wanted to kind of filter those particular out. So you can now come over here and just kind of filter out particular areas, or filter out based on velocity, or without filter notes out based on particular ranges as well. All right. Okay. All right, so we have a question. Can non-Steinberg sound MIDI and loop packs be brought into Cubase, or do I have to set up some kind of user folder to access them? So any loops can be brought in. They may not show up with the pretty icons here, but if you just go to your media base, let's say we go home and go to your file browser, you could look anywhere on your computer. So you can say, I have audio that's going to be in my documents folder, projects, and I wanted to come over to, you know, this particular folder, and I want to look for, you know, in here. So now I could just go through any particular folder and be able to audition, whether, you know, so as long as it's a standard WAV file, you could just audition directly in. It may not be through the loops and samples, but just coming over here to the file browser, and then you could look anywhere you want. And if you know that you always want to go to a particular folder, like this is where my kicks are, this is where my snares are, you could just right click and add it to favorites. And then once you get to favorites, if you want to go there without having to go through the whole directory, at this point you could just say, I just want to go to my favorites folder, and it'll take you right there. Okay, we have a question from Walter Till. Is there a better way than render in place and have another track, then put the new files back into the old track when I just want to render the plugins of channels? Okay, so let's say I just want to take a small sample. So I think render in place is a great way to do that. There's other ways of doing it. But let's say if we want to, you know, come over here. So if you want to incorporate, you know, the the processing, so let's say, okay, on this particular drum loop, I wanted to put like a nasty flanger on it. So I'll just come. So now if I just come, and one of the things you could do that's a lot of people may not realize is, you know, you could render in place, but it could be critical whether the event is selected or the track is selected. So if I have the track selected and we go to edit to render in place, we go to render settings, we get additional options with the source track. So if the event is selected, we get 2 options. If the track is selected, we get 4. So at this point, I could just say, remove the source track. And if I do that and hit render in place, it's going to render it. And then it could automatically, and I'll just not have it selected and record enabled. So let's say, so if I remove the source tracks and I render, it's basically at this point, kept the same track with this, with the same, so we don't have two tracks that have been added. What a lot of people do is when they go to a render in place here is they will just say, okay, we go to render in place, and you could also choose to disable the source tracks. So the original one is disabled and not going to play back, but that will create a new track. But if you want a track to just be replaced over it, select the track as opposed to the event, and you could choose in the render in place options on the source tracks just to remove the source tracks, and that could be a very clean way of doing it. So that way you don't have duplicative tracks in your project. CKS Germania says, I first started with a tape deck, a turntable, a Casio piano, and a CD player. And you're probably happy too. So. See, Michael Team says you meet the nicest people on a Google Hangout. So that's always, I think that's a great comment. Okay. So Michael Teams wants people to MIDI the like button so I could stay employed. So that's a good thing. I like having a job. So you see Cubase X says, Greg, I loaded a toolbox, EDM toolbox drum, for example, 909 drums intro, and now I drag the MIDI file from the right-hand pane into project. Cubase creates an instrument track. Any way to get it open in Groove Agent? So it's probably... So if we come over here, so let's say we go to loops and samples and we go to EDM toolbox. So a lot of these are going to be MIDI loops. So, and the intention of the MIDI loop is just to come over, and when we drag it in, because this is going to be like when we audition the sounds here, these sounds can be very specific to the instrument. So we could just say, okay. So let's say, okay, I want to listen to like a beat. If I don't select bass, that would be good. All right. So let's say. All right. So if I drag this into my project, now the sounds that we heard here are actually probably coming from Hallian Sonic. So this is actually coming from Groove Agent itself. So a lot of these, when it's a MIDI loop, like we see here, that actually retains the instrument itself. So if you dragged it over and it's not playing, like maybe it's playing in Hallian Sonic SE, you could just add an instrument track and say, okay, I want this to be Groove Agent SE, and then you could just drag the particular event. So hold down Alt, drag, then Alt or Option to copy, and then hold down Control Command to constrain, and then you could remap it. But the intention of the MIDI loops is that when it plays back, all these sounds are triggering very specific instrument sounds by design, so that it's playing back appropriate sounds. So if we had this with like an acoustic jazz kit, it may not make much sense. But when we drag it in, it's going to drag this in and load the instrument as well. So that's really kind of the intention of the MIDI loops. And then you could copy kind of as you see fit and change it if you need to. All right, great to see Michael Pierce back. I hope your mix is going well. All right. So we see question. I always have bad results if I try to insert silence in a project where there are multiple tempo changes and time signatures. Is there a way around this? Seems like an issue with have a whole track spanning. All right. So what you have to do if you have multiple tracks with tempo changes, and I'll just show it on this project here real quick. Okay, so let me just... Okay, so let's say we had... Okay, so let's say we have tempo changes here, and we want to do... So I'll add a tempo track. I'm just going to move this to the top. Okay, so what a lot of people miss on like inserting silence. Just got to remove that. So let's say we have tempo changes. So we have our tempo turned on. All right, so we have our tempo changes. So what you could do is a lot of times you could select a range like this, and you think, okay, I'm going to insert silence, and we go to our edit to range, and we'll say, okay, we're insert silence, and the tempo map doesn't move with that. So what you could do is hold down Control or Command plus Shift, and as we do that, that will do like a global range selection. So let's say, okay, I want to insert silence here. So notice that when you hold down Control or Command plus Shift and use the range selection tool, that's going to select. I don't have to necessarily kind of draw my selection down, but as soon as I make a selection with Control or Command plus Shift, that's going to do it globally. And now when I go to my range and say insert silence, the tempo track events and the audio MIDI events will just get shifted over to the right. So if we look at it now, there's just simply get shifted. So make sure that you do a global selection using Control or Command and Shift with the range selection tool, and then that will include the tempo changes, and then as you insert the silence, everything will kind of remain together. All right. So we see, hi, Greg. In MediaBay, can we strictly have search results based on the file name? Unfortunately, if a folder contains the search term, then all and every file is listed in a folder. Is there an option for this? So I think if we go to MediaBay, we could use like some Boolean conditions. So let's say if I'm coming here, I'm looking for loops. So if I type in piano, so we could find this, so we can see, okay, piano. But let's say, I think if we want to come over here and let's just put, I think we put like quotation marks, that we will only see, so there are some different Boolean conditions. So I think maybe if you use quotation marks. So let's say if I'm looking for like VOC or VOX, like if we put it in quotation marks. So there is some like Boolean conditions where you can say, okay, I want to look for Vox, plus 0.1. And then it will only find like Vox like 0 1s or Vox 0. So there are some different Boolean conditions. So try using, like, I want to say maybe if you do like a quotation, and I think there's a section in the manual about the different Boolean conditions. So let's say I just want to look for Vox, and then you could see that only containing Vox. So so try that. Try some of the different Boolean conditions. So you could do like plus, and you could do brackets for different searches. Okay, so we see a question. Does Cubase a permanently MIDI chord recognizer on MIDI in while recording or not? All right. So I'm not sure if you want to see like a chord track on the MIDI input. If you want to see the chords on the MIDI input. So let's say if we wanted to just... So let's say if I'm playing chords. So if you're in the editor, so let's say we have an editor open, and I think if we go to our status line and enable that, like while I record in, that we can see the current chord display. So let's say I'm just recording. So let me see. I think that we could see. So let's say if we do this, and maybe I just have to, let me just activate MIDI record in the editor. So let's say if I'm doing this, and while we're recording, so A minor, we can see, okay, D minor. So you can see the chord just automatically created there. So if you have the lower zone MIDI editor open, just do that. But you can see the current chord display right there on the way in as well. All right, we see Gareth is back after eating dinner. So Benny's learned so many new tips today. Okay. Okay, so we see also, sorry for being a persistent bother last chat with offline rendering with automation. Thank you, Greg. All right, so yeah, I was going to cover that a little bit. I saw a kind of discussion afterward. But let's say if if you have an audio file and you wanted to do offline, and we have rendering, we have, different automation on it, and we wanted to automate that. So, generally it's not going to be done. We can think of offline as kind of being like a static. So let's say if I'm here and we have this and I wanted to, let's say we'll just put it in a quick loop. And I wanted to automate, let's say, the EQ. Okay, so let's say we have that kind of as our automation. I'll just write some more automation in here. So, like if you have automation in a particular event and you wanted that to be, rendered to the file, so it's not going to be necessarily doing, where we get to F7 and go to your direct offline processing. So if I wanted to apply all the changes, and let's say I have, an effect here as well. So let's say we come, and I just wanted to start automating an effect send. So again, I'll just say I want to have more. All right, so I have like EQ automation, let's say gain. All right, so now if I wanted to, do an offline process to incorporate all of the automation, that's when you just go to render in place, and we'll go to our render settings, and we'll say, okay, let's do our complete signal path. I'll render that as one event. And if, again, like as we mentioned earlier, we'll say, okay, I just wanted to select that particular event. So we could edit. I'm going to select the track. And then I could just say, let's disable the source tracks. We'll do it as one event with a complete signal path. And now that we render, let me just, sorry, I always make that mistake. All right. So we'll do it one more time. So just say, okay, let's get to the render settings, render it. Now that track is disabled, and this track is automatically playing, so that everything is, and I'll just switch this to play mode. So that's captured all of the automation. We could think of the direct offline processing as being more for like a static snapshot. I just want to apply this particular, plugin setting or this plugin as an effect onto it. So, sorry I didn't get to your question on the last live stream. All right. So just see, hi Greg, hello from Finland. Question: can you rename notes on the keyboard in the MIDI editor? I think it's possible in the drum editor. So yeah, it's possible in the drum editor. So let's say if we come here and just add quick instrument track. So if we're here, we could, generally, if you're in the key editor, these notes are going to be kind of more musically based, and it makes sense for these to retain the musical pitch. But if it's going to be triggering samples, that's when you could go into the drum editor and just change the names to whatever sound you want for particular drum sounds or particular MIDI notes. So to rename it, you can't do it in the key editor, but you can in the drum editor quite easily. All right, so we see, hi Greg, do you know when Steinberg will fix the notation bug? When you view notes in Cubase 12, it always looks like the notes are off beat when you view them in tracks. So I haven't noticed anything with that, but let's say, it could be a couple of things because, in the eyes of the computer, you may not have played perfectly on time. So sometimes when you look at some of the notation stuff, you may go, oh, okay, it's actually, the computer is too accurate for, what I really intend to get. So a lot of times if your notation takes looks something like, very typical. Let's say, just find like this Rhodes patch. So say if I look at this in notation, you may see a lot of stuff that looks like it's off time. And it could be that the particular notes are just, played a hair bit too early. So Cubase does have a particular like quant notation appearance quantization. So if we double click, I can say, okay, I want this to be a grand staff. It's a piano part. And I can say the smallest note I intended was an eighth note. The smallest rest I intended was a quarter note. And now if we come over here, we'll put some different interpretive flags. And at this point, I'll just take that and, we can save that as a preset even. And we could just take that. And now our music is much more legible. It's still playing. If we look at this note here and we see when it starts, we can see that it actually starts at, measure 24, beat 4, the 4th 16th pulse, 114. So, that's 6 100ths of a 16th note ahead of the beat. So technically that should start, earlier on the bar line. But when we select it now, Cubase knows to quantize the display. So let me know if that's kind of what you're talking about. So if it, kind of looks, a bit like that, just do a display quantize, and then it will probably show up more musical, but I don't think there's any bugs with that. But let me know if that's kind of what you're running into. All right, so we see, question, when doing render in place, I had an issue while the direct routing was active. Did I do something wrong? I got files with no data when I changed the direct routing. So it could depend on, what functions that you have set for, for the render in place. So, if we're here and we go to render in place, like a lot of times you may notice that I forget to kind of I should learn it by now, that if I have this record enabled, that it won't necessarily, at that point, it won't necessarily, it'll render in place and it'll be silent. But, if you're not sending that to anywhere and you go to the render in place settings, so try going to the render settings and, maybe just choose channel settings. If you do the complete signal path, that could, and there's nothing that's being sent to a particular bus that's being sent to via direct routing, at that point, it may not also be, it could be sending it to nowhere and then result in silence. So check your particular processing settings here as well. And make sure that you didn't accidentally have the track armed for record. That mistake I make all the time. See Gerald Ely just saying global selection tip of the day for him. Okay, so we see from about the Dragon EDM Toolbox MIDI loop. So it says, yeah, I also made a Groove Agent track. Well, and it's like that. So it opens many samples in Sonic SE. Then the last one, can I get it to force it into Howley full? So I think it's going to go directly to the particular instrument that it was actually created in. So if you go into Howley, if you copy it over into Howley and then save the track preset, and then it could automatically go into the full version of Howley. But I think, the intention is that, with every version of Cubase coming with Howley Sonic SE, that, it would sound automatically in the instrument that it was designed to be used with. And knowing that you have that as a constant, that's why they have it automatically go into Hallian Sonic SE, because that's where it was created. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to jiggle that like button. So we see, hey Greg, hope you're doing well. Is there any plan for Cubase IC, I guess Cubase IC Pro on Android? I haven't heard of any. They did it initially on Android, and you might be able to still find it on the Amazon App Store. So if you could try finding it on the Amazon App Store. So I think it was like $14 or something like that. But there was a lot of issues at the time when it was done with kind of Android being very consistent across different devices. But I will see if there's any, I know that they recently did, Cubases for Android, but I'll see if there are any plans. I'll bring it up again and mention it that, people are wanting it, but I haven't heard of anything that's been announced. But often I'm not in the office, or technically a Steinberg employee. So I'm not privy to a lot of those discussions, but I'll mention it. Okay, so you just see about the notation, says the bug is in MIDI view. Even if the notes are quantized, it's only visible when you view the bars in track view, not when you open up the MIDI notes. I can drop you an email showing you the bug until next stream. So yeah, please do. So you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So once again, clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, so you see, hello, I have a UR22C interface. How can I activate direct monitoring? Because in my Cubase 12 Pro, this option is inactive. So when I have a UR242C, which is kind of the same interface with two more. So make sure that, so when I go to my studio setup, so if you have a UR22, it's different, but a UR22C has built-in DSP. So you could just click on the direct monitoring there. So that's how it works on my interface, my UR24C, which is kind of just a UR22C with two more outputs. So it's kind of the same generation. So if you could let me know if you're running Mac or PC, and also if you have the dedicated ASIO driver or core audio driver on Mac installed versus just kind of using something like a ASIO for all for the interface, but you should be able to do direct monitoring or on Mac or PC. All right, so we see Michael Teams' soup recipe. All right. Okay, so I think I'm at the end of questions. I know we have some questions that were sent in advance, so let me jump to those. Thank you for all the great questions. I hope that people have learned a new tip or trick. All right, so let me just jump over. Okay, I think we covered some of these. Okay, so we had a question about, I think it was with, we kind of started this last time. I couldn't find the macro, so we'll take another stab at it today. And it was someone who was doing editing, like maybe a guitar part, and they wanted to be able to select a region that was maybe bad and set it and turn the region red in color. And then copy it so that they could kind of drop in like maybe another part from a third verse into a second or first verse and have it turn red. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. It's from Joe from Rochester, and he's been such a loyal attendee. So we'll see if we get this going for him. All right, so let's say we have, we're listening to our file, and we say, okay, this is kind of a mistake here. So I created a project logical editor preset. So let's take a look at that. All right, and I guess just made this like selected tracks to red. So with this, what we're going to do is that we're going to say the container type is equal to event, and the property is set to the track is selected. We're going to set it to this color red. Okay, so this is our project logical editor preset, and what we did is what we want to do is to select the region with the range tool, split it, select it, and then have it turn red and copy it so that we could then paste the particular event. So let's go to our key commands, and we kind of do this with a condition that maybe we go to the editing preference and auto select events under cursor is disabled. So, and what we did is we'll take a look at the macro, and we had this project logical editor preset as part of the macro. So I think we come over here. Let's find our macro for split and select range. So we said transport locators to selection. So that's going to take the range selection, move to left and right locators there. We're going to split the range. We're going to switch the tool to the object selection tool, go to the transport, move the transport to the left locator. We're going to activate the auto select events under cursor. We're going to then nudge the cursor one frame to the right. Then we're going to turn off that preference so that we're kind of at the same starting point, and then hit copy, and then run this project logical editor preset to turn it red. Okay, so if I didn't mess up, we'll try to run the macro now. So we'll go to macro, and we'll say our split and select range. And let's try it again. Tested it right before the live stream. It worked. Let me just. All right. So ideally, that would move this over one frame and then automatically split. Let's try it on a new project here real quick. Okay, so we'll try it again on this. And I'll just change this color. All right, so there it went to the first color and selected it. And now if I come over here and paste, we could have that same event that we could paste anywhere. So, so I'm just going to change my first color here in my project color setup so it's red. Okay, so let's say my color, we'll make it blue. So now when I run the macro, if we do this correctly again, we'll just say split and select a range and have it turn red, and that's copied. And now I could just move my cursor here and paste it just like that. So once again, just take this particular area here, and to open up that macro one more time, it's just going to be split and select range there. So now we do this one more time and set it up to trigger that macro. That event turns red, and then come right over here and paste just like that. And we could probably make a macro to paste it and then turn it red if you wanted to as well, if you wanted to keep it the same color. So let me know if that's helpful, Joe. Thanks for your patience on that. Okay, so we have a question. My PC system running Windows 7 and Windows 4 32-bit fatally crashed. I have previously backed up all projects on an external hard drive. I have an iMac running OS X Catalina and would prefer not to update my operating system. Is there a version of Cubase Artist that I could use my Mac that could open up my Nuendo projects? I understand it is possible to open a Steinberg application in 32-bit mode on a 64-bit Mac. Where is reputable place to buy the version of Cubase you recommend? So I'm trying to remember if, I'm trying to remember if Cubase 12 works on Catalina or not. But you might have to, so when you get Cubase 12, it's on a new licensing system. If you upgrade, if you upgrade to Nuendo 12 or Nuendo, or Cubase 12, if you upgrade to the latest version, you upgrade via the license on your e-licenser, and that will upgrade your license on the e-licenser to version 11, but a non-upgradable version, and then it goes from there from 11 to 12. So it's going to first do the upgrade on your to Cubase or Nuendo 11 on the e-licenser, and then will turn it into a non-upgradable license, and then it will activate using the Steinberg licensing manager. So with that, you'll have the license for Cubase 11, and that will run previous generations of Cubase. So if you have a Cubase 11 license on the e-licenser, that will run Cubase 10, 9, 8, 7. And then you should be able to open it up directly with earlier versions. So if you could, so there may be dealers that still have a Cubase Artist 11 copy in stock. If they have it in stock, and you'll need to activate it with the e-licenser code, then that will upgrade to I think if you bought a new version, that it would still activate it to your e-licenser. I'm not sure if it would take it straight to the new Steinberg licensing system, but that would probably be your best bet. So that, because I think you will need an earlier version of Nuendo or Cubase to run on Catalina. So give that a try. Okay, so we have a question. Greg, why do I hear all MIDI tracks when rendering? So if you're using external MIDI, realize that that's going to play back in real time, and the real time MIDI may still sound through the inputs if you have it set up as external instruments. So it could be that it's being run as external instrument. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. And stuff that I couldn't figure out today, I'll try to get sorted out for Friday's live stream. Sorry about so many of them today. All right. Okay. Okay, we got a question from Gareth. Can you automate chord track assignment to different instrument tracks for different song sections? All right, so let's take a look. So I'm not sure if it's automatable, but you could. I will show you a way that you might be able to do it. So let's add a chord track. Okay, so we have our retro log, and let's add a different instrument. Okay, so let's say if we send it to monitored tracks, I don't think that's automatable. Let's give it a shot. All right, so let's say we have both of these now on monitor. Okay, so let's see if we could. So I think if we select, like, let's say we have, just go ahead and duplicate these tracks so we can do it. So we can show it across multiple ones. All right, so let's say if I have my two retro logs selected, let's see if I now just take the first two chords, if they're selected, if we go to project, to chord track, and say chords to MIDI, it's going to do them all. So you could, just take those. So I don't know a way to automate it, but you could just simply come over here and do both, and now you could kind of have it play so you hear only. So now I will mute the chord track. And then you could have it, switch between the two different instruments as you go along there. But I don't know of a clever way to kind of automate a parameter to have that automatically, you know, to switch between it going. So you may have to kind of just manually copy the parts, Gareth. Sorry about that. Everyone see people like Michael Team's recipe for Texas chili. So sounds good. Okay, so I see that get the email about the notation bug, so I'll take a look at it. All right, wonderful to see Randy on. All right, so we see, hi Greg, recording regarding MIDI tracking, live tracking. I'm attempting to track drums with several passes on a song into separate lanes so I can edit the best sections. Okay, so let's go ahead and just do a new project here. Okay, so let's add a Groove Agent track here. You hear my son watching Home Improvement next door. All right, so say, all right, so we want to do just like a quick recording, and I think we covered this in the last live stream, but let me see if we can. So let's say we want to do this, let's say 2 measures. Okay, so I'm attempting to track drums with several passes on a song into separate lanes so I can edit the best sections. Okay, so let's say I'm going to put this, my MIDI record mode, into mixed, stacked, no mute. So if we wanted to do so, you know, we could do stacked. So let's say I put it into loop, and I'm just going to hit record here. And let's say next time. All right, so now all of these will show up in lanes. So this will be like my very first take where I just hit snare. So if we want to use kind of the lane tool here, the comp tool. And let's say the next pass was and then so let me know if that works for you. That's kind of, you know, it says you attempt to track drums several passes, song into separate lanes so I can edit the best sections. So, but let me know if that kind of makes sense for what you're doing. And I just see when attempting the second take, I hear the first take, and I'm unable to mute that first take. So yeah, just come right over here, and you know you can just put it into stacked or mixed stacked, no mute while you're in cycled MIDI recording. All right, we see Michael Teams is saying Zoom next Tuesday. So, yes, it is. That'll be January 31st. So, we'll have our 2-hour live stream, followed by a few hours of Zoom meetup. So, it's always a lot of fun. I look forward to it. All right, so I think we're maybe out of questions. All right, so we see Auntie Static says, I learned so much from these live streams. Thanks so much for doing them. All right, let me see if I... See, Graham Richard just says, nearly 3 years on, his live stream is still absolutely fantastic, without doubt the best in the whole web. Without Greg and a wonderful Cubase family, it would never have happened. So I think it's the community that makes it such a great live stream and all the great questions. But thank you for the kind words, Graham. Yeah, so I think our 3-year anniversary will be on March 17th, since we kind of ramped it up for COVID. So maybe we'll try to do something special for our 3-year anniversary. All right. All right, so we just see, hey, Greg, I'm having problems with Patch Shop 2 and opening the VST. It's saying missing license. So if it had worked before, one thing that a lot of people miss with Patch Shop is if you updated to Cubase 12, that you might have to download the latest version of Patch Shop to work within the new Steinberg licensing system. So that could be the factor. So make sure, like, when you go to like the Steinberg download assistant, that you've downloaded the latest version directly of Pad Shop from within the Cubase content. So when you come over here, we'll say, okay, let's go to Cubase Pro 12. And since Pad Shop is, one of the included instruments, make sure that you have, Pad Shop 2.10 installed. And then, so if that's the case and you upgrade to Cubase 12, it's like, oh, it's not working. A lot of people don't update all the instruments. Like, oh, I have Pad Shop, but these will work with the new licensing systems. You see Graham Witcher will try to make the Zoom on Tuesday, and looking forward to seeing Michael Pierce as well. It's if he's finished paying his taxes. Don't remind me. All right, so with that, we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for all of the wonderful questions. We'll be doing our Tuesday Zoom we'll do our end of month Zoom next Tuesday, but we'll be here Friday. I'll go through some of the questions I couldn't figure out today. I'll try to go through them and have answers on Friday's live stream. We want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and thanks for spending your time with us today, whether it's your afternoon, evening, or morning, or the middle of the night if you're in Australia. So thanks for spending the time with us, and we hope to see everyone back on Friday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.